Have you ever had a sprain or strain injury when working on farm? If you're one of the lucky ones who hasn't, chances are you might know or have worked with someone who has. ACC says that 40% of farm injury claims are from a sprain or strain, and most of these happen between August and October. This lines up with spring calving for a lot of farmers. So what has a project between ACC and DairyNZ done to help farmers avoid these injuries and recovery time off, especially during those busy times? Welcome to episode 77 of Talking Dairy. I'm your host, Jack McGowan, and in this episode I'm talking with DairyNZ Senior Scientist Callum Eastwood and QCONZ CEO Chris Leach as they wrap up the Reducing Sprains and Strains project after 3 years. They'll share their highlights and challenges in developing solutions to make jobs both easier and safer over calving. Plus, find out what farmer-inspired innovations are proving a hit and which one had so much demand that it's already hit the market. Tēnā korua, Callum and Chris, thank you for joining the podcast. Let's start by hearing a little bit about who you are. Callum, what's your background and how did you come to be working in this space?
Yeah, so I'm a senior scientist at DairyNZ, based down in our Lincoln office. Most of my work is around workplaces, people on farm, those kind of things, trying to find ways of improving our dairy workplaces. So this project that we're talking about today fits into that because it's about making the job safer and hopefully easier and more enjoyable for people on farm.
How did you end up in this sort of work?
I've always been interested in agriculture and started off looking at technology on farms and kind of evolved to looking at the people and technology interaction and have an interest in making the job easier and making it easier to attract people to work on dairy farms.
Thank you. And how about you, Chris? What's your background?
As you probably will pick up from my accent, I'm originally from the UK. I'm currently the CEO of QCONZ, based in Hamilton, but my involvement with the project really came about through interest that I started in my former employment, which was with DairyNZ back in 2010 when I headed up a project called Milk Smart. And as part of that project, we looked at milker comfort and looking at how we could look at design of the farm dairy but also the techniques and processes in the farm dairy to make things more comfortable and reduce sprains on farm. So that's where my initial interest was tweaked. And then I was approached by Callum and the team to be part of this project about 3 years ago now and jumped at the chance.
Thank you. Callum, how come sprains and strains are such a big deal on dairy farms?
Yeah, I mean, dairying is a physical job, working with animals outside a lot and obviously milking. So, some of our earlier work before this project showed that there's a real peak in particularly sprains and strains injuries over that busy spring period with, calving and earlier starts, it's winter or early spring, those kind of things. So the ACC data shows that there's something like 1,500 claims per year to ACC for sprains and strains injuries. And to ACC, that costs something like $5 million a year in claims. But actually, that's just really the tip of the iceberg. And what it really means is what's happening on farm that's not being claimed, the impact that those even minor sprains and strains and niggles are having on people working on farm. People are working through injuries or having to take a little bit of time off and often putting pressure on the rest of the team that's having to carry on over that period. So that's why we were interested in this area, I guess, is just it's pretty pervasive through dairy farming and probably agriculture in general that we're using our bodies a lot and they get injured and it has an impact on us and our teams.
Early on in the piece, Jack, I think we've found particularly those owner-operators as well, when they get injured and they don't have the luxury of staff there, we're finding them battling through when they shouldn't be, when they're taking the time to properly recover and extending out the repercussions further down the track.
How did the project come about?
We saw an opportunity. ACC have a grant round called the Injury Prevention Grants, and there was a round that was about agriculture and about sprains and strains. So we put a project proposal together and were lucky enough to be successful to get that ACC funding. What was really great about the proposal that we put up was we said over the next 3 years, we will first seek to understand what the real problem is, and then we'll work with farmers and others to come up with some ideas and come up with some tangible potential solutions to sprains and strains problems. So it's one of those few projects that you can be involved in as a researcher where you put a proposal up without saying what you're actually going to create, that we're just going to follow this process and actually understand the problem first before we work out what we're going to deliver. And great that ACC funded that work.
The other thing right from the start, Callum, that really interested me about this project is that they were looking for engineered solutions. So they weren't looking to change people's practices by encouraging better lifting, or it was really looking at let's develop some solutions, some engineered that made things easier on farm through an engineered solution.
And Chris, what's the role of QCONZ as a delivery partner in the project?
We are now on over 95% of dairy farms across New Zealand. So our day-to-day work from our team of auditors out on farm puts us on farm every day. So that provides us with an unparalleled access to see what is actually happening on farm. So I think in the first instance, when Callum approached us to be involved, we were able to offer a solution where our team of auditors, all of whom are sort of come from an agricultural background and have that understanding of farmers, were able to go on farm to identify farms initially, and then go on farm and conduct a series of surveys to really drill down to get the core understanding of where and why these sprain and strain injuries were occurring.
So you've talked to hundreds of farmers to gain insights and understand the biggest pain points when it comes to getting hurt on farm. Callum, what did you find out?
We sort of got started in about this time 3 years ago, and Chris and the team pretty quickly got out there alongside some farmers. So we had a group of 50 farms throughout New Zealand that we sort of talked to before calving started, and at the end of calving to see where they felt the risks were. And then after calving, got them to reflect. Another piece of work that followed up on that is we identified about 120 people who worked on farm that had had injuries over that similar period, and did a phone survey of them, understanding how those injuries occurred and what tasks they were doing and things. And so I guess the insights from all of that kind of work are not particularly surprising, but it was good to hear from farmers about where the risk points were, and particularly what we found was calf pickup, going out and getting calves from the paddock. It was a big risk for sprains and strains. Calf rearing, carrying buckets of milk or bags of meal, or carrying calves during calf rearing, moving calves around, or even teaching them to drink. Unsurprisingly, milking, big risk area. And I guess when spring really takes off and cows are really coming into the herd, that's a lot of work all of a sudden with long hours. I guess some other things that were a bit surprising were just around slips and trips around the farm, but particularly in the dairy, with people slipping on steps, stepping on hoses that aren't put away, slippery floors, during milking, and how important having the right footwear is as well around those slips and trips. So those are some of the insights that came out and gave us ideas about where to focus in the project.
So you said you talked to 50 farms before and after calving. What difference did you see in what they thought might be risks before calving and their reflections after calving?
It was interesting on those 50 farms because the farmers kind of knew where the risk areas were. So what they identified pre-calving period was, similar to what they reflected on post-calving. We did pick up some interesting insights that farmers felt a lot of those risks were preventable. There's something that you could do about them. Also, what we started to pick up through those 50 farmers and their farm teams, because we talked a bit to their farm teams, that kind of we saw throughout the project was there were ideas everywhere and things that people are implementing on their farms, little solutions that they've come up with. And one issue is that those ideas don't get readily shared amongst the sector. So people are having great ideas, but often they are just on their farm or amongst the people they know. So that was something interesting from those 50 farms.
So you both worked closely with farmers to develop solutions that would reduce on-farm injury risks over the busy calving period. Talk us through that co-design process. Who did you get in the room and why?
So we sort of did that period of trying to understand the problem, and then the next step in the process was to design some potential solutions, I guess, and we used a process called co-design. So we had 3 workshops over actually about a year and a half, and they were the whole day workshops. And if you think about the timeline, we managed to dodge COVID for each of those workshops and had them in person. So it was touch and go sometimes about whether we were going to be allowed to actually meet in person, but it all worked out. And what we were looking for was obviously farm systems, skills and knowledge. So that's farmers, farm employees, and some farm systems scientists. But given that we were looking to create tangible engineered solutions, we also had engineering skills in the room, specific health and safety skills, ergonomics, physiotherapists, and sort of human factors design. So tried to get the range of skills that we would need.
It was a very successful approach in that we had people in the room who had no idea about what happened on farm. They were coming with completely no preconceived ideas as to what should or could happen on farm. And that really drove us all to drill down and really think about the practices that were taking place. One particular one, we had a lady who'd come from the forestry industry. That was really insightful, comparing the approaches of the 2 different industries to what is ultimately quite a similar issue that we're facing.
The importance of some of those people was that they sort of asked those why or why not questions, whereas when you're quite involved in dairying, you kind of just make some assumptions. And these processes, it's really good to have people who maybe have less understanding of the processes on a dairy farm, because they actually make you sit back and say, oh yeah, actually, why do we do that?
And how did you decide from the discovery work where you identified the risks, which risks to try and solve, and then which solutions to take forward and engineer?
In our first workshop, we went pretty broad and looked at the main risks that had come through working with farmers in that earlier stage and started to brainstorm ideas around what could be implemented for calf pickup, for calf rearing. What are our options in the milking shed? These processes, they generally create a lot of ideas. The trick is to work out which ones you're going to really invest effort in. And you've only got a couple of years really to try and build these things into something tangible. I guess that was a key part of the process, was create as many ideas as possible and then look at kind of this impact versus effort balance. And some things would have a massive impact, but they're going to be very hard to implement, or vice versa. That's how we picked the ones that we would go ahead with.
And I think it's fair to say, Jack, that those ideas to take forward surfaced fairly quickly in the process. It became fairly obvious, I think, early on as to the direction that we'd be taking from the design perspective.
And what were some of those ideas that came out?
We had some great ideas around trying to provide people's bodies more support during lifting. So we looked at exosuits, and we actually went forward a little bit with that, trying out some commercial exosuits on farm.
So what's an exosuit?
Almost like an external skeleton. You can get very complicated ones that are effectively like Iron Man, a suit that robotic suit you step inside, or you get right down to almost like a back support type suit with straps. So can take the pressure off a certain part of your body, like your back, by adding a little bit of extra load to your upper legs. So there's various suits or harnesses around that could help with milking or lifting buckets of milk, just taking a bit of pressure off. We tested a few of those out, and we have on our project webpage, we have some videos of those exosuits if people are interested. We also looked at, novel milking cluster designs. Could we do something there? We looked at how would you make better choices about the footwear that you wear on farm. Spoiler alert, they were some of the ideas that we followed a little bit and then decided impact versus effort. to let them go and focus on some other ones that I guess we can talk about. And maybe, Chris, you want to cover some of those?
I guess the first one that really took off was our easy entry calf gate for trailers. So that was a design that came up with basically with swung doors that made the operation of picking up calves in the paddock easier, better for the reducing risk of strains through not trying to hold a calf and wrestle open a sliding door that sticks 9 times out of 10 and then prevent the calves that are in the trailer from coming out. So, one fairly easy and quick movement, you can lift the calf and place it into the trailer without additional complexity to the process. So that surfaced fairly early on in the piece, and we progressed that to a state now where it's actually gone to market. We worked in the ideation and development of that prototype with Kia Trailers, and they've now taken that on and is available in the market and has been extremely well received by those that have purchased it, and a great opportunity, particularly I think for the smaller dairy farms. I think some of the larger farms have some more sophisticated methods for calf pickup, but certainly those smaller farms with the tow behind trailer are a really good option.
Yes, I remember seeing the sprung gate. It seems like a no-brainer when you see it.
Absolutely, and I think you touch on something there. These ideas are out there on farm. None of this that we've achieved is rocket science, but the fact is that farmers are busy people. They're actually doing the doing. They have the ideas, but they don't have the time. They don't have the resource to actually get on, and a lot of people don't have the time to take these ideas forward. So I really do commend DairyNZ and their work there, because without DairyNZ, these ideas probably wouldn't have gone anywhere.
And a key part of the project, I guess, and reflection was about understanding the problem, coming up with ideas, but a lot of work stops about there. Getting ideas, in this case, in the hands of farmers, took a bit of effort and a little bit of a secret sauce in terms of talking to the right people like Chris, connecting with whether it's Kia or Gallagher or Wheelco, various companies that we've worked with. We need to connect with people that are going to be able to get these things out there to farmers. And Chris and the team did a great job doing that. And it was a really key part of getting some tangible outcomes for the project and not just stopping at that idea stage.
You mentioned wheels. I've seen another one of the solutions here in the office and I love it. Do you want to tell us about that one?
I think you're probably referring to our Colostrum bucket trolley in partnership with Wheelco, a Tauranga-based company who make trolleys and sell wheels of all descriptions. We have developed what is now close to market prototype that basically allows you to wheel full buckets of colostrum, 2 buckets side by side on a gimbaled platform, enabling you to easily take that from the farm dairy across to the calf shed for calf rearing. It looks really promising. Again, all the feedback that we have had, we've been at Fieldays and at the Matamata Dairy Expo. It's creating a lot of interest, and I believe DairyNZ will have it on stand at Fieldays coming up in June, I believe. A flow-on product, a prototype from the calf trailer was we took the same concept of sprung-loaded doors and in partnership with Gallagher have created a pedestrian gate. The idea being that this pedestrian gate would be positioned between calf pens. An issue that we saw and a cause of injuries were people lifting calves over the partitions between pens or lifting, again, buckets of milk, bags of feed, etc. So the idea behind this particular prototype is it's hands-free, it's sprung-loaded. You can move a calf from pen to pen just by pushing it through the gates. If you're wanting to draft calves from as they've received their colostrum, for example, if you're bringing in a group of calves, you can just push them through the gate, or again, making that access between calf pens much easier.
You mentioned putting some of these ideas to the test on farm, I presume over calving. Chris, what were some of the major challenges you encountered with this and how did you overcome them?
There weren't that many challenges, to be honest. We had the prototypes available on display, should I say, and Fieldays, and we basically put it out there to farmers who came on the stand and said, would you be willing to take it on farm and give it a try? And so they did that, and then we followed up, went on farm and did an evaluation with them, worked through what they liked, what they didn't like, and then used that information to refine the prototypes.
A key part of that, I think, Jack, was this iteration. And I'll keep banging on about this co-design process, but, iteration is also a key part of that you come up with an idea, but you can't make an assumption that you've already solved, the person's problem. The best way is to get that idea in front of people, in this case, out on farm, get farmers to test it, and then they'll tell you it's great, but it just doesn't work in this context, or it's not robust enough or something. And so I think when you look at the trailer gate, we've been through 4 iterations before we got to the final one. The bucket trolley, something similar. I think we're up to about the 4th version. So yeah, that iteration, testing on farm sort of cycle is very important.
Are these expensive to build when you're just building a few prototypes?
Not too bad. And I mean, that's been the great thing about the companies that we've worked with. I guess we've shared costs because we've sort of outlined the problem and I guess the opportunity, and essentially co-invested, and often they've put in their time for free and we might have covered the materials. Great within a project to have the ability to be able to just pay to get some prototypes made, but it's been pretty doable in terms of that, the sort of sharing and co-development approach with those companies.
You've mentioned that 2 of them are so popular that they're already available in the market. So that was the Easy Entry Calf Trailer Gate and the Easy Access Calf Pen Gate. Remind us again where farmers can find those 2.
Yeah, so the Trailer Gates has been available for almost a year through Kia. If you've got a Kia trailer, they'll have sizes to fit right away. And if you went and bought a new trailer, you can just have that gate fitted on the back. There is potential if you have a different kind of trailer, there could be bespoke options made, but you'd need to talk to Kia about that. The calf pen gate is on its way to market, I'd call it, not quite in market. We've been working with Gallagher, who are progressing the sort of final design, but we're hopeful that fairly soon that'll be available through Gallagher and their, distributors.
What are the key takeaways from the project and how do you envision its long-term impact on dairy farmers?
Key takeaways for me is, focusing on low-cost kind of win-win solutions for farmers has been a really good process, good opportunity. Through this project, we've come up with some quite tangible things which won't cost a lot for farmers, and that's been a kind of goal of ours. But also that it just makes the job easier. So it's not all about health and safety. It actually just makes the job easier, and at the same time, hopefully saves people's bodies a bit. And during the project, like I mentioned before, a lot of ideas, particularly around sprains and strains, they don't have to be big ideas. They can just be setting up a structure for putting your hoses away, focusing on what gumboots you're buying and making sure your team has good grip on their gumboots. These are pretty simple things, and working with your team or looking at other farmers that and looking for ideas about what they're doing and just, talking about it a little bit. There's just great stuff out there. It doesn't have to be anything major to make a change here.
Coming from an outside perspective, I think that the real difference with this project is it was beyond the co-design. It was working with stakeholders across the business and working together collaboratively to come up with a solution for farmers. So on the one hand, we had DairyNZ driving the research, providing the rigor, if you like, behind the evaluation and the process to get to the prototype. We then had myself, I was involved in going out and finding those commercial partners who wanted to engage, who saw value in it. And then you had the commercial partners who didn't have the resource opportunity and in some cases the skills to actually go out and test markets with new products. So they were highly engaged from the start, saw opportunities for them. And as a result of the combination of those factors, we've been, I think, successful in actually getting some tangible solutions right through to market. And that's been a great outcome for this project.
Any final thoughts or messages you'd like to share with people listening regarding farm safety and injury prevention efforts, Callum?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd just like to acknowledge the partners in this project and, particularly ACC, also DairyNZ through the levy, QCONZ, Palmu that we worked with, and other companies like Scarlatti and Primary Purpose who really helped bring this all together. Yeah, I sort of talked before about the small things we can do on farm around health and safety, and particularly in the sprains and strains space. And I would also suggest to people to follow Safer Farms, which is our agricultural body that looks at and provides ideas around health and safety on farm. So check out Safer Farms website. And for our project, it's almost coming to a close, but we will be at the DairyNZ site at Fieldays. So come and have a chat to people about some of the things that have come out of the project. We also have a webpage, which will probably be linked at the bottom of this podcast, where some of these ideas, there's some videos, you can see the ideas and hear a bit more about it. And look, get in touch if you've got questions or some great ideas.
Thank you for talking with us today, Callum and Chris. As I said, I've seen some of these solutions in action, and as a farmer myself, they certainly look like they'll make the job easier and safer. And when we're in the middle of calving and our bodies and minds are already a bit tired, anything that makes the job easier is so brilliant. If you like what you've heard today and want to see the innovations yourself, as Callum said, be sure to visit the DairyNZ site at the Mystery Creek Fieldays or check out the DairyNZ website. And yes, you will find a link in the show notes. Mā te wā, mauri ora.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Talking Dairy. Check the show notes on where to go for more information on this topic. And if you have any ideas on future episodes, please send an email to talkingdairy@dairynz.co.nz.